want to vote for a Republican presidential candidate, you need to be a registered Republican. Otherwise, you will not have an opportunity. You can verify your registration by going to lavote.gov, which is County Registrar's Office, and to verify your current registration. And if it is not Republican and you do want to vote for a Republican presidential candidate, you have the opportunity to change your registration as well. Okay. Also, I would encourage you to become involved, if you're not already, by supporting local candidates that are running for office within your area. You can do that by volunteering your time or sharing your resources. Also, you have an opportunity to join us as we work towards ensuring election integrity. So if you go to our website, which is southbayrepublicans.com, and sign up, and we'll get you on the road to helping to make the election straightforward and accurate. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderators, Deputy DA Steve Schreiner, who has 36 years with the LA County Deputy District Attorney's Office, has tried, I don't have my notes, a lot of cases. This was happening when I need my notes. But anyway, here he is.
I can't have her reading out numbers, but if she says these large numbers, one of the guys in the audience, you, Mr. Cool, said, "No, Ken Lamb tries more than that." So I don't want to. All right, I'm Stephen Schreiner, Deputy DA for the last 36 years, hopefully just for a few more months. But I want to thank all of you folks for coming here for the candidate forum. I did a forum this morning for candidates for other offices, and I was chastised in no uncertain terms by Janice that I did not hold people to the time limits. I didn't cut them off. Now, we only had 3 candidates, and it wasn't really very contentious because they're all running for different offices. So I'd like to say at the outset, we're going to give everyone a 2-minute opening and a 2-minute closing. And when we ask the questions, and I'll ask some generic questions of the group and then some follow-ups of individuals, that's to be a 1-minute response. I'm not the best at timing it, so Janice is going to have to get the hook out when she's ready, but I know everyone's on a schedule, so let's go ahead and get going at this point. I don't have bios on the candidates. I know most of them, but what we're going to do is go down the line and ask each candidate to introduce themselves, to give a bio and an opening statement as to why they're running and what they'd like to do. And I'm kind of formal. I tend to call people Mr. or Mrs., and I kind of lapsed into informality the last one with first names because I couldn't pronounce one of the names involved. But since we have 2 judges here, and I don't want to be admonished, I'll call the judges judge, and the other ones I'll be more casual, if that works. We'll start out with Judge Deborah Archuleta. Would you go ahead and get your opening?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Judge Deborah Archuleta. It's this day, and I want to thank Ms. Webb for accommodating our schedules. Many of us came earlier candidates forum, so I want to thank you personally, Justin, to accommodate so you could have a better turnout for today. I was hired as a Watford Attorney's Office in 1999. I started off as a law in a very serious case, and I had the for every district attorney. I had a fabulous career from my perspective in the district office for on behalf of the district attorney's office, advocating for the people of the state. In 2016, I ran for LA County Superior Court, and other than the current district attorney in Grace, I'm going to it's a privilege to be here today because the #1 issue for all of us in this room, whether we're a candidate or a citizen or a business owner, is are we safer today than we were 3 years ago? The answer is unequivocally no. I've been all over this beautiful county of Los Angeles, and the answer is no. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, to restore order to chaos that's been inflicted on all of us. our families, our small businesses, and our communities. We have homeless individuals that are on the streets, drug addiction, mental illness, homelessness, and yet we cannot find within our hearts to find that this is humane treatment of these individuals. These are some of the most marginalized people in our community. We cannot have them with hearts intense. We found a cold brisk morning in January and find that this is a progressive policy but find acceptable. So as our next district attorney, I would ask you to take the website, that's today.com. There are many fine candidates in this race, and I would urge all of you to vote for someone other than the current district attorney, because I think we all in this room, we need to change the top down leadership position. Because George Gascon needs to go. And yes, we are no longer safe in the process. So I think and it's
Thank you, Judge. In the interest of full disclosure, when Judge Archuleta was elected in 2016, she crushed her opponent in the general election. That was me. So, but it should be out. Next, Dan, I'm going to say Dan because you've been coaching on the Capella of this, I believe.
That's right.
But Dan, could you give your opening and introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you. Can you call me Honorable Dan Capella? Sure. Hello. All right. Hello. All right. I am Dan Capelovitz. I want to thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I am the only criminal defense attorney running for DA, and I think that gives me a unique perspective. I'm one of the few that's actually in the courtrooms every day, all over the county. I've never seen Mr. Gascon in a courtroom. I've never seen a lot of these candidates in a courtroom, and I see what's going on. I actually see what's wrong with the system and the problems. Now, I've been a criminal defense attorney for over a decade. Before that, I did a federal clerkship, the Central District. For that, I worked at a law firm, went to UCLA Law. I interned with the Animal Protection Unit, the city attorney, and that's the very first animal protection unit in the country. And I've been endorsed by the founder of that. And before that, I was a journalist. So I entered the race kind of late, just starting to gear up, getting there, but snowballing. And why did I enter? And it's because two reasons. One, I watched the Democratic debate, and I was like, I can beat those people. And so I said, the people deserve better. But the main reason is because I'm in court every day, and people are blaming Gascon for crime. You'd be surprised. He hasn't done anything. There's almost no change from Jackson Lacey to Gascon. His deputy district attorneys, they ignore him. They do whatever they want. They seek high bail. They seek long prison terms. They oppose valid mental health diversion motions. It's the same. I mean, excuse me?
15 seconds.
All right. Well, anyway, so I'll talk to you some more later, but basically, he has some good directives, but he hasn't implemented any of them. And I think I can work with the deputy district attorneys. I work with them every day, and we can make real change happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean McKinney, I know, is a real trial lawyer who has been in courtrooms a number of times. Sean, give us your opening.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really honored to be here with you. In this election, you are electing a leader, a new leader of the District Attorney's Office for Los Angeles County. You're looking for somebody with courage, somebody with character, integrity, and honesty. Now, I've been part of the District Attorney's Office for 25 years. I see one of my former leaders here in the audience today, Mr. Cooley. Yes. And I don't know what kind of an experience Dan is having, but a lot has changed over the last 3 years. An office that used to be very well run is now in chaos and confusion. The priorities have been rearranged so that victims are no longer at the top, community is not at the top. The office has become politicized. People are working in fear. There are reported 20 to 25 lawsuits filed against the current office holder by people who work and career people who work for him. And that's not right. Now, let me tell you a little bit about me in the 45 seconds I have left. I'm a different kind of candidate. I was born into poverty. I lost both my parents by kindergarten. I was raised by my sister who raised 5 children during the worst part of the crack cocaine epidemic. Why is that relevant? Not because you should feel sorry for me, but because life put me through the school of hard knocks. I was immersed in it. I saw both sides of it. I had friends slinging dope on the corner. I had other friends rushing to the corner to buy dope. Things didn't work out well for a lot of them. That educated me. Better than the education I received at the UCLA School of Law, and better than the education I've received over the 25 years I've been part of the DA's office. I've been a better prosecutor because of that life experience. I want to bring that experience to the job of district attorney as somebody who's been in the office for 25 years, who knows the culture, knows the people, have the confidence in the people. I believe I'll be a very effective DA who will bring back accountability and rearrange the priorities. Thank you.
Judge David Bilton has already demonstrated his courage by running for DA as a Republican. The only one, I think, Judge. Judge, why don't you go ahead and get your opening remarks?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Milton. I'm honored to be here. I'm going to go quickly through this in 2 minutes. Mr. McKinney was talking about all those attributes like honor, integrity, and things like that. I thought he was talking about me. Real quickly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the only Republican in the race. I grew up in Indiana. I was born in Pasadena. My parents went to Indiana when I was infant. I grew up there. Pardon me. My siblings, my family, we occupied every branch of the military. Brother hit over in Vietnam. Dad was a Marine. My brother was a Marine. He got hit in Vietnam. He recovered. But that caused me to join the Army Reserve for 6 years. So the rest of us were a very patriotic family. I grew up in a Judeo-Christian family. I was forced to go to church 4 or 5 days a week. Didn't like to, but believe me, those values are still with me today. And I began my career in the DA's office. I think around the time Cooley was a couple of years before me, but that's where I began my legal career. I matriculated quickly in the office. I worked in the Crimes Against the Police Officers Section, Career Criminal Division, Hardcore Gang Division, deputy in charge of one of the area offices. I was appointed at a young, relatively young, George Duke Mason appointed me judge of Los Angeles Court in 1987. He gave me that opportunity to join the judiciary. He's just a fine, wonderful man. I'll never forget him. I then took a job at Chief Assistant Prosecutor in Indianapolis. I did that because I was asked to prosecute Mike Tyson over in Indianapolis. And it was believed that George H.W. Bush would put me on the federal court. It didn't happen. Came back to LA. Pete Wilson appointed me to the district, to the Superior Court of Los Angeles. I served that court for 24 years. So 36 years public service, 24 as a judge, 12 as a prosecutor. I think I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, maybe Hawkins will introduce himself, but I think you are a defense attorney, aren't you?
I am a defense attorney.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Nathan Hockman. I'm running for LA County District Attorney along with these fine candidates. The primary mission of government is to keep us safe. We entrust that primary mission to the district attorney. Our current district attorney, George Gascon, has failed that mission miserably. When it comes, for instance, to smash and grab robbers, George Gascon is not leading the task force as I would, but he's not even invited to the press conference announcing it. When it comes to going after fentanyl dealers who are killing 18 to 35-year-olds, the #1 killer is fentanyl poisoning. George Gascon can't even be bothered to give a warning to convicted fentanyl dealers that if you do the crime again and someone dies, you will be charged with murder. When it comes to homelessness, George Gascon has taken the tools away from law enforcement, to be proper partners with the local and state agencies to deal with homeless, and we watched the homeless crisis skyrocket in our county. Now, is this a shock? Is this a shock that someone like George Gascon could have failed so miserably? Of course not. Because George Gascon has never personally prosecuted or defended a case in his entire life. Let me give you the contrast, which is myself, and I bring three things to this race, which is not only why I will be the next district attorney and be a very good one, but how I will beat an incredibly well-funded George Gascon / George Soros. Here's how. I have 34 years of criminal justice experience, graduated Stanford Law School, clerked for a federal judge, was a federal prosecutor for 7 years and went after narcotics traffickers, gang members, international money launderers. I ran the environmental crime section, went after air, sea, and ground polluters. Thereafter, President George W. Bush nominated me, and I got unanimous Senate confirmation to be the U.S. Assistant Attorney General back in D.C., running a litigating division, that's the tax division, with a $100 million budget and 350 lawyers doing cases around the nation. Got done with that, came back to Los Angeles and ran 2 major international law firms, government investigations practice, and along the way, I was president of the LA City Ethics Commission, and I was the co-founder of the LA Sheriff's Foundation. That's experience. Although these candidates are excellent trial attorneys, they cannot be viewed as being able to lead an organization with a $460 million budget and over 2,100 personnel. 10 seconds. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim, I hate cutting in and off of these things, but I did such a poor job controlling it in the last session until I have to stay on top of it. So what we're going to do is going to ask a series of questions of the group that I've been given and told I don't get to ask any harsh, pointed, cross-examining type questions. So we'll get some answers from the group. I'll ask a couple of follow-ups to individual candidates. And then before we throw it open to the audience, we'll give everyone 2 minutes to get their close, because we want to make sure they each have time to do that. Okay? So, since Nathan's on a roll, I'm going to ask that he go ahead and get back up and tell us what his position is on the reforms that have led to our current no cash bail situation.
No cash bail is a recipe for having people finally get arrested for crimes in the morning and then be out by the afternoon. Again, it doesn't mean that our old cash bail system didn't need reform. What we need to focus on is what bail has traditionally looked at, a risk-based analysis. You want to give bail to make sure someone doesn't commit crimes in the future and that they show up for future court appearances. That's the point of bail. And certain problems with cash bail we had where people were actually getting out on bail because the bail was key to the crime, not the person. And that person should have gotten a much higher bail. And on the other side, people were not being able to meet bail, though they didn't have any of the risks. So what I would do is reform, whether you call it the zero bail system or the cash bail system, to focus on a risk-based analysis and make sure that the people who are going to hurt us in the future never get out of prison in the present. Thank you.
And I've been admonished once again, I'm supposed to remind you guys in close that it's a 1-minute response. And I hate doing that because I always hated judges that would cut me off when I had all these great things to say in closing argument. I needed an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we all know how that goes. Judge Milton, you go ahead and give your response.
Thank you. I agree with most of the comments made by Mr. Hockman. I have experience in that area. As a judge, I sat on the bail committee where we judges collaborated and we made determinations as to what bail should be appropriate in the different types of offenses, from the low-level misdemeanors all the way to the major crimes. And so the factors, the analysis involved is something I'm keenly aware of. I think the present system that's Gascon is utilizing is inadequate. It exposes us not only to further risk of harm by perpetrators, but also we need a guarantee that they return to court. And so if you have a bonding agent's going to come looking for you and bring you back. Otherwise, you're out on your own and you'll probably commit another crime. I don't have an opposition for low risk, low offense offenders for ankle monitoring that, and keep them in home, and we can track them that way for very low risk football offenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. John, you're still in the trenches, so what's your view of this issue?
Yes, and I deal with this almost every day as a supervisor of the courthouse in East LA. This is a very complicated topic, actually, so let me try in the next 50 seconds. We currently have a pretrial detention system that is a hybrid, meaning at the front end, there's a risk assessment where the judge assesses whether to release somebody on their own recognizance. And if the judge says, no, you're too dangerous, that person can still avail themselves of bail. Bail is actually a key to get out of jail for people who a judge said, I'm not willing to release. We can improve the current system by improving the risk assessment process, which is ad hoc, court to court, and even within a court, the judge isn't considering all the factors from case to case. It is a mess. Or we can get rid of bail entirely and go to what was proposed under Prop 25, which would be a true risk assessment system using a universal risk assessment tool where a judge decided either you are trustworthy enough to release or you're not. And then there's a paper trail, there's transparency, and there's accountability. And once that judge said, no, I'm not releasing you, judges tend to be risk averse. That person is in until their case is resolved. We get rid of the arguments that the system is unfair, that it treats poor people differently from wealthy people. I think that really is the future of California. How long it takes us to get there remains to be seen. It's already working in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Dan, I'm guessing you might give us a little different take. So hopefully.
You've guessed correctly. And thanks for correcting me. There's another criminal defense attorney. But I'm the only one who represents indigent criminals. I'm on the bar panel. I'm court appointed to represent indigent defendants and victims. I think I'm the only one who's actually court appointed to represent victims. And as for bail, it's a two-tier system. There's rich people and poor people. Poor people, they are coerced to take deals. The deputy district attorney will say, oh, they're a danger to the community, they're a danger, we gotta give them high bail. And then they'll offer them time served so they get out. And the people plead guilty to crimes they did not commit just to get out of jail. They'll say they killed or they kidnapped Lindbergh's baby to get out of jail, I'm telling you. And so it's a two-tier system. When you go to court, sometimes the deputy district attorney will say, is your guy in or out? Because they know it's a two-different system. Because someone's out, they're gonna get a better offer. They're gonna be able to assist their attorney. And so, yes, if people are truly, by clear and convincing evidence, a danger and a flight risk, they should be kept in. But if someone, all of them are presumed innocent, and if someone is presumed innocent on a low-level crime should have a vehicle monitor be tracked by the government, I mean, that's absurd. So I think my time's up, but I'm happy to talk to any of you anytime. My cell phone numbers are out there. Call me anytime about it. I'll tell you how it really is.
Judge Archuleta, I'd like to get your take on this, and even though this is a forum, not a debate specifically, if you care to respond to anybody we just heard, feel free.
I don't think that's necessary. When I was a deputy district attorney, I asked for reasonable bail, and as a judge, I imposed reasonable bail. The blanket policies that George Gascon has implemented are a thing in our society. They do not protect the public. You and me, given the blanket policies. Bail needs to be an individualized and a particularized assessment for each and every person who goes before the court. We need to know about the prior history. Was the victim particularly vulnerable? Was this person on probation or parole? Was a weapon used? Was the victim particularly vulnerable? Has this person been to court and made court appearances before? Ladies and gentlemen, I know for a fact that the current deputy district attorneys working for the current administration are not allowed to go to court except in very rare instances and on high profile and high publicity cases where Gascon knows he's going to get headlines only under those conditions and circumstances to see let his DAs go in and ask for bail. I'm still a sitting member of the bench even though I'm on an unpaid leave, and my friends sitting in criminal courts tell me they are so frustrated because the DAs are under orders not to go in and ask for bail. I did an interview on this website, LA Progressive, along with George Gascon. You should hear his answer about cash bail.
10 seconds, Judge.
He is opposed to cash bail and talks about how proud he is that since he doesn't impose bail, there's a case, look it up, 5 follow-home robberies ending up in a murder because he refuses to let his deputies ask for bail to protect you.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judge, I cut you off,
You don't have to use Mr. Schneider.
and you're already on a roll here. Let's go on to the next group question. And the question I was given is, what would you do about repeat offenders in the criminal justice system? And I thought, the ask question on strike, so feel free to lapse into that, take your position.
Well, Mr. Cooley, who's an esteemed member of the legal community and present here today, he was one of the leaders in the three strikes movement. Okay, he's to be commended for that because when we put serious and violent felons in custody and in jail where they belong, crime fell and all of us were safe. Gascon has implemented blanket policies. There's no longer strikes that are filed. When I'm elected, I will be imposing strike priors again on serious and violent felonies. I believe in weapons enhancements. The Democratic Party likes to talk about all the gun legislation imposed here in the state of California. However, we have a DA who refuses to file the weapons enhancements. Some of us are old enough, and I'm sure Mr. Cooley recalls this as well. Use a gun, go to jail. Doesn't happen anymore unless you're a law-abiding citizen defending your family and your business and your own property. So the only people that are going to jail these days, ladies and gentlemen, are the law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment right to protect themselves and families.
Dan and Vincent, once again, we did it different.
Heck, yes. All right,
I'm so
so,
glad we sat next to each other.
yes, we should go have monkeys afterwards. All right. All right, actually, I'm a pro Second Amendment guy, you'd be surprised, and so I do think it's another constitutional right that we should be protecting, in addition to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, Sixth, Eighth, into protecting people's constitutional rights. In terms of 3 strikes, has been a disaster. It just can more than double the sentence for someone. We have long sentences, way longer than necessary. I know a lot of the opponents say, oh, they're against mass incarceration, but then they want to go backwards and they want to implement all these policies that fueled mass incarceration. And deputy district attorneys do ask for bail, so I don't know where you're getting your information. They do it every day. And they do file, Gascon's filed enhancements. Not only that, his policy is now to allege aggravating factors in every single case where they can, which is basically every case. And that way they're facing the high curbing of law change that the presumptive sentence is a midterm of 3 terms. So he's pro mass incarceration too. You guys should love him in terms of mass incarceration. He hasn't, I don't know, nothing's changed. He's like Jackie Lacey II. So,
10 seconds.
all right, actually, I'm done. All right, thanks.
John, I know you can give us a little different spin on this here, but I want to tweak the question because it was generically what to do about repeat offenders. I know since you're still in the trenches with the DA's office, you're under certain directives as to what you can or can't do alleging strikes. So feel free to weave that into your 60-second response.
Okay, thank you. I'm keeping a little time. So just to set the record straight, we do file strikes. Much to Gascon's chagrin, because he's fighting that in court right now. There's a case pending before the California Supreme Court where he'd like to stop doing it, but we're still doing it. And guns are still getting prosecuted, but only in some cases, as it's been pointed out. If a case makes it into the media, it gets treated one way. If it doesn't, it gets treated a different way. So we have 2 tiers of justice in LA County right now. The strike law has been very effective in dealing with violent crime in Los Angeles County, and the statistics are so solid that one cannot really make an argument against it. In 1992 and 93, we had the highest homicide rates in the history of Los Angeles County, nearly 2,000 homicides a year. By 2014, we were down to 1960 levels of homicides, about 500, a little more than 500 a year. Now, what happened after 1993? We got the 3 strikes law in 1994. And that law, combined with our 1020 light tough gun enhancement law and the STEP Act, which prosecutes violent gang members helped bring the violent crime rate down nearly 200% from the early 90s to about 2014. And then attitudes changed. In 2014, George Gascon and others co-authored Prop 47. We had this new brand of criminal justice reform that has led to an increase in crime, including an increase in homicides. We need to effectively prosecute repeat offenders. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry about cutting you.
Judge Milton, you go ahead and give your response.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I concur with Judge Archuleta and Mr. McKinney here as about what's happening. I mean, it has happened. I intend this, if I'm become deputy district attorney, I will reverse those policies of Mr. Gascon. If you go to my website, miltonforga.com, you'll find 10 points there. And one of them is reversal of that one policy. 67%, I believe, of the habitual offenders are committing crimes that, I'm sorry, I misstated there. Habitual offenders commit 67% of the serious felonies that occur in Los Angeles County. Even those strikes are absolutely pertinent, not only pertinent, but necessary to keep this crime rate down. I'll reverse those policies. I'm the most experienced DA here, candidate here to be the next district attorney. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Milton. And Nathan, I'm pleading this a little bit with you and challenge you a little bit because I did hear you speak one time a year or so ago and say something to the effect you thought the 3 strikes law had been either overused or abused or something by our office at some point. Recall saying that?
I don't recall saying it because I never would.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. George Gascon gets into office, one of his first things, literally his first day in office, he abolishes the ability for his office to prosecute 3-strike cases. Steve Cooley, who is here, actually was very instrumental in making the 3 strikes law go after the worst of the worst. People with violent and serious offenses, not once, not twice, but the 3rd time. And by the way, Steve Cooley, even though he's worked with most of the candidates here, has endorsed me in this race. So what happened? What happened is the Association of Deputy District Attorneys, 800 deputy district attorneys, wanted to challenge that in court. Who did they go to challenge it in court? Myself and my law firm. And what did we do? We went into court and we told the judge that George Gascon cannot violate the law in order to enforce it. And we won. We got a judge to give a preliminary injunction stopping George Gascon's 3 strikes policy in its tracks. Then George Gascon goes to the appellate court, makes the same argument. We won at the appellate argument. And what did the appellate court say? It said that George Gascon cannot be a sovereign with unreviewable discretion. If the law says that a prosecutor shall bring a 3 strikes case, George Gascon can be King George Gascon and overrule that law and overrule the people and overrule the state legislature. If I can do that as a private citizen lawyer, I will completely reverse George Gascon's special directives that are pro-criminal blanket policies day one.
Thanks, David. Next again, since you're on the roll, we're going to keep you going for just a minute here. One of the questions that was suggested that I ask, and I really want to focus on it because I spent a lot of my career prosecuting 16 and 17-year-old murderers as adults. And now it's the policy not to prosecute juveniles as adults. Do you think that there's any appropriate time to prosecute juveniles as adults?
Yes, and unfortunately, juveniles, 16, 17-year-olds, often, not often, but rarely commit adult crimes and should be prosecuted when they do these type of crimes. Again, I want to make it clear, the overwhelming number of juvenile crimes should be prosecuted in juvenile court. But part of the problem when you prosecute a 16 or 17-year-old is to engage in multiple murders in juvenile court is that there's a hard out when they're 25. They basically age out in the juvenile system and they're done. Which is why when George Gascon came into office and had another blanket pro-criminal juvenile policy, he was basically encouraging gangs to give the guns to the 16 and the 17-year-olds because he knows if they get convicted, for these violent offenses, they're out by 25. Yet if you were 18 or older, you might get life without the possibility of prison or even a parole, or even with the possibility of parole, but you'll spend decades behind bars. So I believe that there are circumstances, and again, they are the smallest number of cases, but in those cases, we have to send the message that if you do these type of crimes, even if you're 16 or 17-year-old, there are severe consequences for your actions. Thank you.
There's been for a long time, changes in the law with juveniles back and forth. What's your position on prosecuting them as adults?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. When I was in the district office, we used to handle the fitness hearings, and the judge would determine whether or not a person should be tried as an adult. I think it was 16 years old or above. But listen, I agree with Mr. Hoffman. A lot of the kids, the teenagers aren't committing that many of them. Well, they are now because they can get away with it by just having adults give them do the murder. But let me just share with you a set of facts here. I had a case where juveniles came in, they saw a man, he was out of gas. He was had a gas can, putting it in his, trying to fill up his car, and they said, "Give me your money." He gave them their money. They weren't satisfied with that. They beat him down to the ground, and they poured the gas all over him, and they set him afire. This is not something that should be, these people should be prosecuted as adults, in my view. That's my view about that. I think the policy before Gascon was a workable policy. I want to point out one more thing in my earlier response, kind of misspoke. Mr. Gascon, he has, he's charging these enhancements now because he's up for re-election.
Thank you, Judge. Now, Mr. McKinney, I know you've been in the trenches lately. You were major crimes, correct?
I was.
Well, you can tell, I'm gonna ask you about that later, but I think we're probably prosecuting some gang homicides as well.
Yes.
So, using that experience, what's your response to the question about juveniles treated as adults?
Yes. Well, my sister used to tell me, when you make adult decisions, you should face adult consequences. And although that's a little overly simplistic for what we're talking about here, the sentiment still has value. I prosecuted the case involving USC student Shenron G, who some of you will remember was beaten to death on the USC campus by a group of teenagers. And I prosecuted a 16 and 17-year-old in an adult criminal court, and they got the just sentence that they deserved. It is not common, but there are times when a 16 or 17-year-old does something for which they are not fit for the capacity of our juvenile system. Our juvenile system has limitations. It wasn't designed to rehabilitate hardcore criminals, murderers, rapists, and gang members. Now, we can kid ourselves by leaving them there and thinking that we're doing something good, but we're neither doing anything good for them, their victims, or society as a whole. So yes, I do agree that there are times, and it's not a decision to be taken lightly, but there are times when a 16 or 17-year-old must face adult criminal consequences.
Thanks, John, I appreciate it. And once again, I'm hoping that you're not with the party line on this.
Actually, I agree with everybody. No, I do agree with Mr. Milton, who said that Gascon has changed his policy based on the election and based on the recalls. He wasn't charging juveniles as adults. He is doing that now. And I'm against it. 16 and 17-year-olds should not go to adult prison, where they will get raped, by the way. No one, that is cruel and unusual punishment. It's breaking to everyone. And people, I don't know, just think of yourself when you're 16, 17. That is a totally different person. Study after study says that someone's mind doesn't even really get together until you're 26. That's why there's laws about people getting sentenced or resentenced who are 26 and under. We need not to try juveniles as adults. Now, and they get out to 25, that might seem unfair. That means they're in custody for 7 years. So someone's 16 years old. I know people think, oh, that's nothing. Most people couldn't stand a day in jail that are so in favor of, keeping people with no bail, and they think misdemeanors aren't a big deal because, oh, they're only facing a year in jail as if that's nothing. Well, that's very serious. You can lose your job, lose your home, your kids lose their home. So these are very serious things, and it shouldn't be, this is off topic, but shouldn't be putting people in jail, for presumed innocence. And we shouldn't be, taking children and throwing them in adult prisons. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Judge Archuleta, what's your position on the issue of treating children as adults?
If you do the adult crime, you do the adult time. Juveniles do not go to state prison. They go to the California Youth Authority, which is the state prison for the people under the age of 25. Let's talk about Hannah Tubbs for just a moment. I'm sure many of you remember Hannah Tubbs. That's the transgender adult that was preyed upon that little girl at the Denny's in Palmdale. Okay, everybody knows about Hannah Tubbs. That's what George Gascon stands for. Also with the retail robberies, ladies and gentlemen, these are robberies. These are violent and serious felonies. And the gang members are sending in the kids, the juveniles, defendants, to run in with those guns and hold you and me and everybody else that goes in that Nordstrom, in that coffee house, in that business shop, to hold those people at gunpoint to commit the crimes for the benefit of the gang. They're sending the kids in on purpose because they know under the current district attorney that those kids will be out and be committing the next one the next day, stealing those designer purses. They're not stealing because they're hungry or they need diapers or baby formula. They're stealing because it's for the benefit of the gang. So once again, my position is, and it always has been, you do the adult crime and you do the adult time. 16 and 17-year-olds that rape, rob, murder, and run our people through the years, become victims, our businesses, they need to be in prison at some appropriate period of time, and hopefully they can be saved. But many of these people are using this as an excuse, and it's not a get out of jail free system when I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Archuleta. Judge, since you're up and you're on a roll now, you kind of touched on my next topic that I've been given, and that concerns your position on Prop 47, what it's done to the system, and should it be changed?
Prop 47, ladies and gentlemen, Hershey Bar. Do you know what the real title of this proposition is? Safe Neighborhood and Schools Act. Very good. Does anybody in this room, and I know we're in a nice neighborhood, feel any safer now than you were 3 years ago?
No.
Do your children, are they safer at school? I know some people in this room, their kids are at UCLA Law School like my daughter is. My kids are not safer at school. Your kids are not safer at school, and I live in a nice part of town. Prop 47 was co-authored by George Gascon. It is an abomination to all of us law-abiding citizens because we were sold a bill of goods that, oh yes, who doesn't want to vote for safe neighborhoods and schools? Who doesn't want to help those marginalized individuals that need a hand up and not to be thrown in jail with the key thrown away? However, we as citizens were sold a bill of goods. Under Jackie Lacey's administration, she filed misdemeanor cases. We have now over 14,000 unfiled misdemeanors. Those are victims of crime sitting on the DA's office's desk because he refuses to enforce the law because of his own ideological bent. Prop 47 is a failure, and I hope that the voters change it come November. I'm sure Dan would agree with me.
All right. Well, one thing I totally disagree with, we are safer now than we were 3 years ago. I need to break it to you. Violent crime is down in Los Angeles County. And you've been convinced by the fear mongers who want everyone to be in fear. And actually these smash and grabs, they're copycat crimes because they went on the news so many times, showed the same clip in San Francisco over and over again. And people got the idea. And people don't go in these stores with guns. I've never seen one case where they go in the store with a gun to rob a purse with a bunch of people. And if someone gets a juvenile gun, guess what? They can be charged as an adult, and they'll be a co-conspirator. So they are charged as adult. They don't get away with crime. And Prop 47 came into law because people didn't think that if you stole a candy bar, you should be able to get charged as a felony. I don't think any of you would actually believe that now. And I hate to break it to you, but most of these smash and grabs are charged as felonies. They're $950, believe me, does not buy what it used to, and it's so easy. Every case I've had of smash and grab or this run and grab stuff, it's a felony. It's over $950. Or if two people conspire to steal a candy bar, guess what? They can be charged with felony conspiracy. Or let's say they're in a convenience store and that person grabs them and then they kind of shake loose and run away. Guess what? Now they can be charged with robbery, which is a strike. So,
10 seconds.
all right, so Prop 47 was good because the people don't want people thrown in prison or get felony convictions for petty theft, and the serious ones are charged as felonies. Thank you.
And stay there.
All right, you can cross-examine me
Let
too.
me, since you voted for that.
Okay,
You've used the term a couple of times, and I'm very curious as to, you talk about mass incarceration.
yes.
What does that mean?
Mass incarceration means that, as you know, the United States has the highest prison population in the world, and that's not even per person. I mean, that's like higher than China, has more people. And Los Angeles County has a very high percentage of people in prison, disproportionately people of color and people underprivileged, and people, you don't need 50 years, to pay your time. The longer sentences is costing people money. I'm sure people here are into fiscal conservativeness. We're wasting millions of dollars on throwing people in prison forever.
And I apologize for cutting you off. I just want to refocus my question. Because what I meant is, we have 40 million people in this state. How many people should we have in prison? Is there a number you have in mind? When is it too many?
It's too many now. It's too many.
How many are there in there?
In prison in America, I think it's like 2 million. I don't know. I don't like California. I don't have the numbers, but it's high. I think it's up there with the percentage in the United States. So it's a high percentage. It's something like 1 out of something, a really low number of Black males are in either jail, prison, or probation, or in the criminal justice system. I mean, that's crazy. We need to get people help. Most people in jail, or a huge percentage, have mental health problems. They shouldn't be in jail. They should be in programs. And they obviously need more money for beds to put them in these programs. People that are addicted to drugs don't need to be in jail.
And thank you.
All right.
You saved that for your closing. I'm going to give John an opportunity to respond to my original question about Prop 47. And if there's anything else you disagree with, you have a minute.
Okay, great. I'd rather talk about mass incarceration, but to borrow a term from Deborah, I agree that Prop 47 is an abomination. And it really has affected our community by resulting in an astronomical rise in drug addiction because it eviscerated the drug courts that were offering effective drug treatment at the felony level. And it's caused this incredible rise in theft crimes because now you have drug addicted people, more and more of them committing theft crimes along with your normal petty thieves. We really need to repeal it, replace it, or significantly modify it. If I can piggyback on your question about mass incarceration, I think it's a brilliant question. It's one I've asked people too. How do you know we have mass incarceration? What should the number be? Let me just go through this very quickly. The U.S. Department of Justice did a study and determined half of all violent crime is never even reported by Americans. We take it on the chin and deal with it ourselves. Half, that whole universe of crime never shows up on the spectrum. Of the other half, some lower percentage is successfully investigated, some lower percentage is successfully prosecuted, some lower percentage ends up in a meaningful jail sentence. So of the whole universe of violent crime, we have a very small percentage resulting in incarceration. Is that mass incarceration? In a country of 340 million people, having somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million people in custody across the country, including does that sound like mass to you? Well, I'll just say this, if we have mass incarceration, I don't even know what the term is for the amount of victimization that we have. And that's where our focus should be.
So the original question was about Prop 47, your position, but if you'd like to share your position on mass incarceration, you're welcome to do that as well.
Thank you very much. I agree. 47 should be repealed. We were misled as voters in Los Angeles County. There's no question about that. But Gascon uses 47 as a way to undercharge. Let's think this out here for a second. He says the jurisdictional amount is $950, so it's a misdemeanor. Well, he's ignoring the penal code, which provides that if you enter into any structure, whether it's a residential dwelling or a commercial structure, and you have the intent to commit theft of any amount, it's a burglary. And if you use force or fear on any occupant there, it's a robbery. That's what he's doing. He's just using this 47 just kind of as a superficial way to undercharge. This is what he does. Think about what he's done with these deportation things. He wants any entrant into this country to be undercharged so that they can't be deported. What kind of policy is that, folks? Don't you want people who are in the country committing crimes deported after they do their time? That's what I'm about, public protection. And as DA, I will enforce the law that should be enforced. Mass incarceration, I'm about public protection. However many end up in there, they just end up in there. You commit a crime where you belong in prison, and there's been an adjudication through the court. You've got a full panoply of rights, cross-examination, lawyers, and everything else at taxpayers' expense. And you're going to tell me that, well, there's just too many people in prison. Well, stop doing the crimes. That's my position. Thank you.
I can focus you a little bit more because I like to challenge you when I can. The Prop 47 issue, and you can go into the mass incarceration that we're now discussing. However, with regard to Prop 47, we talked about amounts. What about charging felony for petty with a prior, which we no longer do? Does that factor in?
So here's the upshot of Proposition 47. Everybody but down on this panel pretty much believes it is an abomination. But what are any one of us going to do about it? Because you can complain as much as you want, but if you can't actually do something about it, then it's a bunch of words. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to win as DA. I'm going to beat George Gascon. And I'm going to do as DA what George Gascon did to get Proposition 47 passed in the first place, which is co-author a proposition to reverse the most negative effects of Proposition 47. Then I'm going to work with the state legislatures. And by the way, interesting enough, there are Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature who are seeing the ill effects of Proposition 47 in their jurisdictions. And and I'm talking about the Democrats because they control the state legislature, they're the ones that are putting the bills forward. But George Gascon is not going to put his name and his energy to getting a bill passed that basically reverses his baby, Proposition 47. I will do that on day one, is align myself with all the people throughout the state to create, for instance, a serial felony act. In other words, you can aggregate. If it's amounts less than $950, you can aggregate those amounts and turn that into a felony. It's been discussed, it's been legislated, it hasn't been passed yet, but DA Hochman will work to get that passed. Thank you.
Since you're on the roll, as I said before, one of the things that you folks have brought up is we keep saying video of these organized retail theft, the smash and grabs, of the mobs going in, be they juvenile or adult or whatever. Do you have any plan in place for how you would address that issue?
Certainly. So I recently went down to Compton to talk to the owner of Reuben's Bakery. What is Reuben's Bakery? It's been there for 48 years. And on January 2nd at 3 a.m., there was a street closure. Basically, a bunch of juveniles brought about 50 cars and shut down an intersection, lit a mattress on fire, and then a 12-year-old took a white Kia that he had stolen from somewhere else, backed it into the iron grate of Reuben's Bakery, tore it down, and a whole bunch, they estimated about 100 juveniles ran inside there and ransacked the place. What has happened so far? The sheriffs, the deputy sheriffs I've talked to, they're trying to locate these people, but they understand, as the juveniles understand, that under George Gascon's policy, he will not prosecute a juvenile for a misdemeanor offense. And the most important part, and the people who are most paying attention to these, to George Gascon's directives, are the criminals themselves. So what I will do when I become district attorney is make it crystal clear that if you want to go into the Reuben's Bakeries of this world, the consequences will be severe for the juveniles and for the adults. And we will turn the spiral of lawlessness that starts with Reuben's Bakery and ends up in a smash and grab in a mall into a spiral of lawfulness, where we bring back the rule of law, accountability, and consequences for one's actions.
Thank you. I did want to say, watching the time and the questions that we have left and all that, if there's anyone who feels they could just join in other comments, you're all welcome to do that. But we want to give everyone an opportunity. Judge Milton?
Yeah, can I repeat that?
Certainly. What I had asked is about the organized retail thefts, the smash and grabs that we see so much on TV now. Do you have a response to how to deal with it?
And of course, organized retail theft, and that's what is conspiracy among two or more people to commit a crime. They can be charged as a felony, and as I mentioned in my earlier comments, these are burglaries and robberies. There's no reason they should be filed as misdemeanors, no matter what the value is. Day one, I intend to do that. I think that I'm the candidate that criminals fear most because I will enforce the law. I'm a no-nonsense person. I adhere strictly to the law, the rules. That's what I'm about. And I will get the desired results in these cases. I'm about public protection. We're going to stop this nonsense. Thank you.
You take with your position on the issue?
Okay, thank you. I think I generally agree with the comments that you've heard thus far. This is a problem that we actually can't prosecute our way out of. And the way we do that is we charge felonies whenever the evidence allows. We can't funnel these cases off to misdemeanor court where nothing will happen. And Judge Milton is right. A conspiracy to commit a misdemeanor is a felony. So we can go after these individuals whether they steal over $950 worth of goods or under $950 worth of goods. And that's going to be important. It's going to be important that they know that if they get caught, they're going to state prison. They're not going to go to county jail. The DA has to advocate for prison. And I think once they start to see their little friends go off to prison, then posting these videos on Instagram won't be so funny anymore. But we got to do that. The other thing we have to do is empower these businesses to protect their customers, their employees, and their merchandise. We can't have security officers, trained security officers holding up their phones, watching this all go down. And if that means giving them extra protection in civil court, then that's what we need to do. We need to have these security officers lay hands on people and hold them till the police arrive. That's an important component. And I think the way that we bring these crimes to an end.
Thank you.
Well, first I want to correct something Mr. Milton said. If you go into a store and steal a candy bar, they can't be charged with burglary. That's not the law. Anyway, so let me talk about something. People think, oh, these criminals, they know Gascon's just going to let them off, so they're going to commit crimes. Now, I work with people charged with crimes every single day. I actually know the mindset. The rational criminal who's going to go into the store and go, I'm going to steal $949, so I'll get a misdemeanor. That doesn't exist. People, when they commit crimes, they assume they're not going to get caught or they wouldn't do it. So the length of sentence, 3 strikes, all that will do nothing to reduce crime. What makes people not do crime is whether the chance that they will get caught. And that's a law enforcement issue. Law enforcement, talk about mass incarceration because all these crimes people have been arrested. Well, that's a law enforcement issue. Maybe we need to train better detectives and get better police officers. And now police are telling people, oh, Gascon's, you won't do anything, so we're not even going to arrest people. That's a law enforcement issue. That's not a DA issue. When they arrest people and charge them with a crime, Gascon files them. I get these cases all the time, and they're usually charged as felonies. So again, you guys don't believe the hype. Don't believe the fear mongers. All right, I know what's really happening. I'm telling you what's happening, and everyone's trying to mislead you, saying there's all this stuff happening. We are safer now, and don't have much to do with Gascon, but I hate to break it to you, but crime, I hate to break it to you, but crime is very complex.
Yeah, we gotta keep,
All right.
more questions. I'm trying to cover the whole.
All right.
Judge Archuleta?
I guess Dan hasn't had the privilege of representing those clients that go in to steal at Rite Aid with the calculator, right, to make sure that they're stealing at our $950 or Target or Nordstrom. I'm sure we've all seen that. Maybe he's missed that, but I've seen that, the organized groups that have come in with their calculators to make sure they're staying under the limit. There's a few things we need to do. Not only do we need to protect security guards in civil court, we need to protect them in criminal courts as well, so that they're not accused of crimes themselves in defending people's lives and property. I have spoken with many law enforcement agencies. They're working in conjunction with armed security guards at many of the malls, the jewelry stores, etc. We have to have multi-agency task force to be able to have both civilian private security as well as law enforcement personnel to combat the retail theft that has taken place. Additionally, George Gascon had an opportunity to receive $2 million free money from the governor for the retail theft task force. And for some reason, he didn't think it was important to put more specialized prosecutors on that task force, or to use that free $2 million of your taxpayer money and mine too to combat this issue. We are now an international embarrassment across the world because of this organized retail theft. We've got the World Cup coming in 2026 and the Olympics coming in 2028, and all eyes are already going to be on us, and I want it to be for the right reasons and not because we are leading the world in the embarrassing retail theft. It's also affecting our tax base. High dollar earners are leaving, businesses are closing up, which is impacting all of our public services, all of our small businesses. Many are immigrant owned. This is how they raise and feed their families, and no one seems to give a darn about that. This is a ripple effect in our community. It's not just stealing at Nordstrom, it's stealing at the Armenian owned bakery in my community. Thank you.
I have another question, and I want you to know, Dan didn't write this question, and I didn't either, but it may sound like Dan did. Do you believe the criminal justice system is the proper venue for dealing with drug dealers and for drug users? Can you respond to that?
Absolutely. I believe that people that are addicted to drugs must be required to go to mandatory drug treatment with consequences for failing to participate. Not to get sober, but to participate. It takes the average drug addict 14 to 15 times of intensive drug treatment programs and rehabilitation to be able to kick the habit. Drug dealers need to go to jail. In my last assignment, before I took my unpaid leave, I was sitting the Edelman Dependency Court. I was taking 10 to 15 babies per week at birth from mothers because these babies had methamphetamine and fentanyl in their little newborn systems, where they were on morphine drips because the babies were detoxing. They were on oxygen because their lungs were underdeveloped and they couldn't breathe. They were on IV feedings because they couldn't suckle. Now, I'm sorry, the visibly pregnant woman who is about to go into labor that's giving birth, she needs to be in a treatment program. One of the first things I had to do when I got over there was I removed the 10th child from this woman who is a drug addict, and those kids are all in foster care, and we know how those outcomes are. But the SOB that sells that visibly pregnant woman, that meth and fentanyl, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, he needs to be in local custody or statewide custody, depending on his record. Fentanyl is killing our young people, and I heard this statistic, 18
10 seconds.
they're killing our infants and newborns as well, because I witnessed it personally. Thank you.
Dan, you only get 60 seconds.
Okay, all right. So, yes, drug users should not be prosecuted. It's actually a disease being addicted to drugs. We don't prosecute people with other health issues. They need to be treated, they need treatment. And so we should be prosecuting our way out of drug addiction. It's not going to work. Now, we should help people get treatment. And yes, it does take many times. So it is hard. It's very hard to quit drugs. It's a very serious issue. It's a health issue. And we need more money towards that instead of just prosecuting people. Also, most people who OD on fentanyl, they're doing other drugs and are laced with fentanyl. So it's possible we need to decriminalize drugs so we can actually make sure that these drugs aren't tainted.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
John, I know you have a perspective on this as well, but I just kind of wanted to steer back towards the original question of whether or not criminal justice system is the appropriate forum for dealing with it. And then what you've seen from your perspective as a line prosecutor during the years.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the criminal justice system is the appropriate place for drug dealers, for sure. Now, there are drug dealers and drug dealers. There's a street level dealer who's usually pretty young and not making a whole lot of money doing it. He needs to be held accountable. I grew up with a lot of drug dealers like that. I called them my friend. And when they went off to jail, usually for a fairly reasonable amount of time, I knew that that was the best thing for them. And over time, it did help them. It helped them to mature. And some of them are actually doing quite well today. We don't want to treat those street level dealers like drug kingpins and drug traffickers the way Gascon is doing. He treats them all the same. Whether you sell 1 rock of cocaine or whether you sell 100 pounds, you're subject to the same prosecution because he won't let the prosecutors charge weight enhancements in drug cases. Now, drug users is different. Like, I wish we had some sort of civil-based infrastructure for dealing with people who are addicted to drugs, but we don't. Our criminal courts adapted to deal with hardcore drug addicted people and foster meaningful treatment, and it worked. I worked in one of those drug courts for over a year. I absolutely saw it work until Prop 47 came along and undermined it all. So yeah, you know, drugs drive a lot of problems in our community. These are not your father's drugs or your grandfather's drugs. This is poison that's being passed around today. Fentanyl is killing young people at a mind-boggling rate. We have got to get serious about this.
Thank you. Judge Bolton, you've been in the system for a long time. What's your position on whether or not it's the appropriate forum for dealing with drug use and abuse?
Yes, I left the court in 2014, where I then began as a private judge. But my experience on the court, I sat a couple of years in children's court, and I share the comments by Judge Archuleta. I've had cases where I had to take the child away because the mother just dumped, kind of poison on the child, leaving these children with the most horrific lifetime medical issues that you could possibly imagine. It's just heartbreaking to see this happen to these unborn children. Deformities and all other kind of problems. They're addicted at birth when they're born. And so the criminal justice system, when I left, we had a drug court that worked quite well. I clearly could attest to that. I saw it as a judge, it worked quite well. But what we have to remember here is the Supreme Court has held that the state of being addicted, just like the state of being homeless, or the state of being mentally ill, those aren't crimes. The district doesn't have a right to arrest you because you're homeless, or because you're addicted, or because you have mental defects. It's only after that person commits a crime that the district attorney has jurisdiction. And when the district attorney gets that jurisdiction because there's been commission of a crime by one of those 3 statuses, then that drug court was working perfectly to try to work those people through those issues. And so to answer the question directly, yes, I think that's different than possession for sale and sale of drugs. These people belong in prison.
Thank you, Judge.
I want to focus on fentanyl for a moment because in 2017, fentanyl hit the West Coast. 6 years later, it's the #1 killer of 18 to 35-year-olds. 2 milligrams of fentanyl will kill you in 2 minutes. It's 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. The fact that George Gascon hasn't screamed from the rafters and used every single tool in his capacity to go after fentanyl dealers and get rid of the word dealers. These are fentanyl murderers. They know that their drug will kill someone. It's not only is it not your daddy's drugs, your daddy's drugs were more about getting you high. Fentanyl will kill you. If you don't know someone or a family that has lost someone from fentanyl poisoning, and I have sat with those parents, Sadly, in the next 4 years, you absolutely will. The exponential growth is unmistakable unless we get a DA in Los Angeles that basically wants to treat the fentanyl dealers as murderers, which I will do from day one, and couple that with a massive education effort in the middle and high schools targeting students and their parents to alert them of the dangers, the lethal dangers of fentanyl. George Gascon, by not doing this, literally has blood on his hands. People are going to die today because of his inaction, and that absolutely has to stop.
Thank you. All right, looking at the hour, I want everyone to know, and the candidates, that you're being spared all the great questions that I personally wanted to ask all of you because we're running out of time here. However, we're saving the 2 minutes, and Janice is going to enforce this on pain of death. And I'm not asking about the death penalty, okay, we're not going there. But 2 minutes per candidate to close it out. And since one of the candidates has a very tight schedule, we're going to let him go first. Nathan, go ahead.
So I think you've heard today that the consensus is George Gascon must go. But how are you going to beat it? How are you going to beat George Gascon / George Soros, who was able to tap millions of dollars to overcome Jackie Lacey's efforts in 2020? I will be able to do that because I have 3 things going for my campaign that none of the other campaigns do. Let's start it with fundraising. I will have raised approximately today about $1.4 million, which is $500,000 more than has ever been raised by a DA candidate in history at this point. That will allow me to go to TV, radio, social media, and print mail to reach the 2 million voters in the primary and then the 4 million voters in the general election in a way that no other candidate can. I've outraised all these folks by at least 2, 3, or 10 to 1. And if you can't get your message out to the voters, George Gascon will win. And if you have a good message and you can't get it out, you are the tree in the forest that fell and nobody heard. We have to get the message out to the voters. They voted him in 2020, and they don't get this message, they will vote him in 2024. I will have the I alone will have the financial resources to do that. Second, endorsements. Endorsements are very important. Steve Cooley is here, a 3-term Los Angeles district attorney who ran the DA's office. I think the consensus is in the best way we've seen probably in our lifetime. He knows all the candidates. He worked with all the candidates. He hired some of the candidates. Yet he has chosen me as his endorsed candidate because I believe he sees my 34 years of criminal justice experience on all sides of the aisle, and he sees my management experience, leading a U.S. Department of Justice division, private law firms, the LA City Ethics Division, the LA Sheriff's Foundation. And so I can do the job on day one. So I have the financial resources to be Gascon. I can do the job on day one, and I will be an independent district attorney, someone who actually will get politics out of the office and bring it back to what it does best, which is using common sense, the skills of the John McKinneys of the world to actually do the trials and unshackle him from the shackles George Gascon has put on him. I will do that on day one and bring back the district attorney's office to the prominence it once had. Thank you.
I can't help but chime in here for a moment. I've worked under 5 DAs. I have to reluctantly admit, Steve Cooley is the best DA I've worked for, but then again, the rest are all Democrats, so it's not saying. Judge Milton?
All right, thank you. I don't think someone should be able to buy the campaign. I'm going to get my message out in a grassroots way. Another thing, I've known Mr. Cooley for years. I think, I joined the DA's office just a couple of years after he did. And I think what happened here is Mr. Hockman joined the race early on, a year or so ago. I joined it in like June. I bet the dollars to donuts. If I joined back in when he did, Cooley would be endorsing me. So let me tell you what I truly believe here. I've been a serious prosecutor, a serious judge. I strictly adhere to the law. That's just it. I've written 2 death penalty bills. One was passed, one was declined. I wrote the stalking co-wrote the stalking legislation. I got two death penalty verdicts as a prosecutor. I sentenced a man to death. And I don't say this in a bragging way. These are serious things. They're unpleasant topics, but this is something the district attorney ought to know about, all the nuances involved, whether there's a moratorium by Democrat governors or whatever they're doing. It's the law. The people have asked for it twice. And I'm there to enforce the law, and that's what I will do. I have to make decisions as a DA whether or not I should use the resources of the DA's budget to pursue things. If you're never going to be, the penalty will never be carried out. The guy that I sentenced to death here in LA County in 1984, he's still there. The guy that I had a death penalty verdict on in 1992, he's still there. And the man I sentenced to death in 1996, he's still there. So you look at, well, the people want that, and that's why I'm about. I'm a decent man, and you can believe me, I will enforce the law. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have time for try to keep it to 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you all for being here. This campaign should not be about who has the most money in the primary. It really shouldn't. In fact, that could be a trap, because the person with the most money might come through the primary but not be the strongest candidate to face George Gascon in November. There are certain realities to Los Angeles County, whether we like them or not. It's a Democratic county. And right now, Republicans certainly, and I think a lot of Democrats are unhappy with George Gascon. A lot of Democrats are willing to change leadership, but they're only willing to go so far. So what I would leave you with today is, this is chess, not checkers. You've got to be thinking about November as much as you're thinking about March. You've got to be asking yourself, which of these candidates shares my values, is qualified to run the DA's office, and not might be Gascon, but will be Gascon. And I submit to you that person is me. With my 25 years of experience in this office, and although I don't have the endorsement of Mr. Cooley, I know I have the respect of Mr. Cooley and so many other people in the DA's office right now. Talk about hit the ground running. I know the people. I know the culture. I know who's who in the zoo. I know already what the leadership should look like. I'm not going to have to come in from the outside like some of these candidates, including Mr. Hoffman, and learn the room. That's important because we want change on day one. So again, I humbly ask you to take a serious look at my candidacy for DA. When I'm in a room with Mr. Gascon, there are other fine candidates at the days, but he's not thinking about them. He's worried about me. I'm the Black lifelong Democrat who grew up without parents in a crime-ridden environment, who put himself through college and law school, and he gave 25 years of his life to public service. And because of leaders like Mr. Cooley, I was put in the position to handle some of the biggest and most consequential cases in LA County, and I did it successfully. Gascon cannot contend with that. Keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Again, I want to thank you for coming here and listening to me. I do agree with the last two speakers that you should be able to buy your way into the race. It's not going to happen. People have tried before and it doesn't happen. I ran for Attorney General against Mr. Hoffman, and I think he spent $2.7 million. You can correct me if I'm wrong. In LA County, I got 109,000 votes. He got 190,000 votes. He beat me, but he literally 10 to 1, 100 to 1. He had 2.7 million to 1. And so, I mean, I'm raising money now. I think that people, I'll tell you how I'm going to win. The fearmongers, the mass incarcerators, they're going to split the vote 8 ways, whatever it is. It's going to be Gascon and me in November. And Gascon is unpopular, but he does have backing, and some people do like him. And then once I'm in the primary, I think I'm going to get the support. I might even get Mr. Cooley's. I probably would have had his too if I entered the race late also, but that's okay. And I just want to thank you again for coming.
And I'm the guy who's in court every day, and I know what's going on. I deal with people of all types, I have friends in high places, low places. I actually had a life before being an attorney. I have the widest life experience probably of anyone here, and I really know how to help LA County. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Archie. I'm going to do your 2-minute closing. I'm going to open it to the audience for questions after you're done. So we're running right up against it, so if you give your closing.
Well, I'm curious with all of Mr. Hoffman's money when he ran for Attorney General as a Republican, now he's running as an independent in this race. We know the mayoral's race in LA City and how much money was spent on that and who was backing who. And we also saw that a woman of color was able to successfully overcome and defeat one of the most well-funded candidates in the history of this country. I don't come from a background of privilege. I didn't go to Stanford Law School. My journey started when I was 19 years old, and I was one of those victims of violent crime that's been discussed today, and I did not report it to the police. In fact, I didn't even tell my parents. I was thrown into a wall by a violent, abusive boyfriend, and I didn't realize it, ladies and gentlemen, but for 2 years, you see me standing up here, former prosecutor, spent a lot of time doing DV homicides games, and I'm an elected Superior Court judge other than Gascon. I'm the only candidate in this race that's won a countywide race. I had a blood clot on my brain. I had a subdural hematoma and I had a blood clot on my brain because I was the victim of domestic violence. When I survived that incident, I made a pact with my good Lord that I would do for other victims what wasn't done for me. I worked as a legal secretary. I put myself through community college, making coffee and copies for the lawyers. I went to Fullerton College and I transferred to UC Irvine. I got a degree in economics, still working as a legal secretary. In 1989, I had the privilege of getting hired as a law clerk on a horrible case involving the homicide of a 12-year-old boy whose body was cut up into 240 pieces and he was thrown in bags like meat and found in a trash dumpster in Hacienda Heights. I passed the bar the first time in 1991, and I started on my successful career as a prosecutor. Unlike any other candidate in this race, I've taken off the prosecutorial blinders, of which I'm very proud of my career because I do believe in serving the victims. I am the judge, I follow the law, but I got the privilege of putting on the black robe. Because when you're a judge, you have to ensure that not only the victims' rights are primary and public safety is the #1 issue, but you also have to protect the other side of the aisle, including the integrity and the credibility of the district attorney's office. I've heard mass incarceration thrown around a lot, but we also have mass victimization under the current administration. And I'm the only candidate up here that has stepped down from the bench on an unpaid leave of absence to step up for you, the people. Every single one of you in this room, in this county. And that's why George Gascon, actually, disrespect to John McKinney, I'm the one occupying some real estate in Mr. Gascon's head. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Judge Archie. Ladies and gentlemen, I was going to thank all the candidates. Before we do that, we're up against it, but we wanted to open it up to the audience for questions of either the group or the individual candidates. However, I just want to put it out there. This was not intended to be a debate or a format where candidates can single out other candidates. Mr. Hochman has asked for an opportunity to respond. If one of you would like to ask Mr. Hochman a question about his party affiliation, he'd be happy to answer that. So does anyone have any questions for the candidates at this time? Janice has a microphone for him. Mr. Cooley, do you have a question like that?
I'd like to ask Mr. Hochman about party affiliation.
That's a good question.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. So one of my biggest complaints with George Gascon is that he has substituted a party affiliation in a political ideology instead of making the calls on liberty, on crimes, based on just the facts and the law. So when I decided to run for the DA's position, which is a nonpartisan position, which means you will not see party affiliation next to your name on the ballot, I decided that I needed to start with myself. If I truly believed the DA needed to be independent, I had to divorce myself from my party affiliation, and I actually registered as a no party preference independent. It didn't change my values one whit. What it did is it communicates to the voters how important I think independence is for a district attorney. I encourage all of these folks If they really want to show the voters that they're going to be an independent district attorney, today, after we get done here, you can get on the computer and re-register as independents, no party preference. Because if you do it, that at least is a signal that we are truly walking the walk, as Mr. McKinney has used an expression before. And we're going to be independent DAs because we start with ourselves. So I think, again, that is the answer, Ms. Archuleta, as to why I am running as an independent and no party preference in this election, although my values have not changed one whit.
Well, can I ask you a question, Mr.
No,
Hoffman?
no, I'm sorry.
Well,
This is not a debate. It's not a debate. It's not a debate.
Question?
We're asking questions from the audience. They may have a question for you. Janice, do we have another question?
Hi, thank you for coming out and speaking so well about what you stand for. I appreciate all of you here. 45% of the criminals, as high as 45% of the criminals in state prison are illegally here from another country. What would be your solution to end that migrancy into our prisons? There is a bill out there that could put them in their country of origin, and our country would pay for them to be reincarcerated back to their country of origin. Thank you.
Is that of a particular candidate, or are you asking the whole group?
The whole.
All right.
Part of the advantage of having spent a decent part of my career in the federal government is I understand the federal government's obligation to protect the border, which has not been doing. And to your point, again, there are laws on the books that just need to be enforced. That if someone comes into California or Los Angeles County and they commit a crime and their status is illegal, they are undocumented in doing that crime, that person, after they've committed the crime, can have the Customs and Border Patrol notified. Now, we have sanctuary laws that have been passed in this state that I fought against when I was a prosecutor. So you have to respect that the law's in place. But that being said, as a DA, you can work the system and work the state laws to bring people who come into this country illegally and then committed crimes deported back to their countries of origin. I'm 100% believer in that. Thank you.
Judge Milton, did you want to respond to the question as well?
Certainly, I agree with that. What we have here is whether that person is an illegal entrant or someone who's legally entitled to be here in the country to commit a crime, the district attorney has jurisdiction to prosecute that crime. If this illegal entrant commits that crime, I would prosecute him to the full extent of law. And when his term is up, he should be turned over for deportation. I won't urge that he be deported before he does his time. Now, there's some debate there whether or not that's a good strategy. I think you commit offense against the people of the state of California, you should do your time. But it might be more expedient to let the person be deported immediately. The problem is you can't rely upon him being deported. So I want that person to be prosecuted fully and do the full term that he's required to do under the law, and then see if we can beg the Justice Department to deport him like he should be.
Thank you, Judge Milton. I want to interrupt at this point. Nathan Hoffman is kind enough to come and attend. He has another commitment he has to get to. Apologize.
Well, I have one more question before Mr. Hoffman leaves.
Well, we're taking questions from the audience.
Isn't he?
I'll answer for
Mr.
you.
Hoffman, let me just ask you, you have nothing to hide. No, it's Judge Archuleta. Let me ask you, Mr. Hoffman, you were running as
No,
district
we're actually
attorney.
taking questions from the audience now.
Well, isn't the attorney, okay, let me just ask, isn't the Attorney General the top law enforcement executive for the state of California? So my question
Is there a
why would
question
you run
from the-
here
from
or
the
as a
audience?
Republican and you wouldn't run in the local and you're running as an independent? See, I'm not understanding the logic. That was my only question. I mean no disrespect. I was just trying to wrap my answer around that head, my head around that answer, because district attorney is the top
We're
law
at the
enforcement
point
in
where
the
the
county.
audience is asking questions. Is
Okay, I'm just
anyone in
trying
the
to
audience-
explain, Mr. Schreiber, why I wanted to ask Mr. Hoffman the question, but it's not going to get answered.
Do we have
Thank you.
anyone in the audience who has a question?
Williams, you have a question?
I can have many questions, but I try to control myself. Just ask one question, and I have relayed to you, Dan. Okay, your speeches filled with victimhood, which I really, against as very strong woman as I am, I was not born in this country. I was raised, grew up in Taiwan. When I came over here, I couldn't speak English. And I still kind of barely speak English. Here's my English teacher, Audrey. Anyway, you need to take a trip to Asian countries, okay? I grew up in Taiwan. There was no welfare system. The welfare system only for people disabled, okay? And I feel like the system right now is not protecting white people. It's a silent white people, okay? So we, minority, need to protect the white people. And no white people will speak up, so I want to speak up for all the loving white people here. So my question for you, are you running as a party affiliation, as a Democrat or independent?
Okay, thank you. I am registered Green Party. I actually agree with Mr. Hoffman. This is a nonpartisan position, as it should be, because we should be independent. I was no party preference for many, many years. And in fact, I may go again just so I can vote in the primary. I can go in the Republican primary. And so this is supposed to be independent. It shouldn't be based on who your party affiliation. Mr. Hoffman's a smart guy. He knows that in Los Angeles County, a Republican probably not going to get voted in. So he's smart. He ran as an independent. As he saw in the AG race, he did about as well as I did, with millions of dollars behind him. And so, as a so-called white person, I do stand up for white people. I stand up for all people. And I'm the only one who actually literally represents victims here. Gascon, I have a client, Gascon, he's a victim of a murder, probably a friend, or he wasn't a victim of murder, he wouldn't be alive, but his friend was murdered, and he was thrown in jail by Gascon because he missed one court date, and then the deputy district attorney argued for $100,000 bail, which the judge approved, which is basically, they thought was akin to no bail, and they're throwing their own victims in prison. Gascon said he wouldn't do that. He is doing that. So I actually fight for the civil rights of victims and witnesses and defendants. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, because I know we're beyond our period. Sir?
I got a question for Mr. McKinney. What would you do to try to stem the flow of young adults into the criminal justice system?
Okay, thank you for that question. I've talked about this before publicly. I talked about expanding the lane of the district attorney's office. Obviously, public safety and accountability is job 1, 2, and 3 for the district attorney. But we have bandwidth to do more than that. We can actually move the district attorney's office into the crime prevention space, because if we're ever going to bring crime down in a meaningful way, we have to prevent it from happening in the first place. And we know for a fact that African American and Latino young men drive the majority of violent crime in Los Angeles County. That's not to blame anybody, that's just a fact. If we know that, then the question becomes, what do we do about it? The district attorney shouldn't just sit on his hands and say, well, as district attorney, my job is just to sit around and wait for the police to bring us cases to prosecute. We can move into the space of crime prevention, intervention, and mentorship, focusing on 5th and 6th graders, particularly Black and Latino boys. They've got to be, as best we can, usher them through those middle school years when they first start to get introduced to negative ideas and lifestyles. If we can do that, the money we save on the back end, the victims that never happen on the back end, will change Los Angeles in a meaningful way. Not the gimmicks that we're getting from George Gascon, when he just nullifies the law, nullifies prosecutions and say, look, prosecutions are down under me. Yeah, but lives aren't changing under you. People aren't getting better under you. The statistics may be getting better, but that's not helpful to us. So That's what I would do. I think that there is room for the DA to do that. Obviously, it involves collaboration. It involves getting more money into the DA's budget to do that, but I think it'd be worth it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to point out that, no, we're not softball, we're not taking random statements, Dan, we're not. I'm just pointing out, Dan, we're not taking random statements, all right?
No, I'll ask a softball
No,
question to
no,
Mr.
no.
Kaplowitz if he wants one. You pick your question and you answer
No, we're done with the
it. Give
question.
yourself the softball question.
I've answered all the softball questions, but yeah, I just want to point out,
No, just give
you are
yourself the
from the.
softball question.
All right, you should know, why am I the greatest person on this,
No. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for coming. I know we're 15 minutes beyond our time, but I thank all the candidates for showing up. Many of them would like to stay and talk to you individually, answer your questions, tell you other things, that's fine. I want to thank them for coming, and thank everyone else for coming out on Saturday.